There was once a mountain climber named Elena who attempted to scale the world's most treacherous peak. Unlike other climbers who traveled in groups, seeking encouragement and validation from their companions, Elena climbed alone, the storm of voices as she began her ascent. Crowds gathered at the base camp. Seasoned climbers, guides, and spectators all had opinions about her solitary approach. Some cheered her on, calling her brave and inspiring. Others whispered that she was foolish to attempt such a dangerous climb solo. "She'll never make it," they said. "She's too small, too inexperienced, too reckless." The mountain has claimed better climbers than her. A famous mountaineer, someone whose opinion carried weight in the climbing community, approached her publicly. "You're making a mistake," he declared loud enough for everyone to hear. "This mountain doesn't forgive pride. You should join our expedition or turn back now." Elena heard every word, but her face remained unchanged. She neither smiled at the praise nor frowned at the criticism. She had trained herself to filter all external noise through one simple question: does this help me reach the summit? Most opinions, she had learned, were just projections of other people's fears and limitations. She neither defended her choice nor explained her strategy. She simply adjusted her gear, checked her route one final time, and took the first step up the mountain. The crowd watched in a mixture of admiration and skepticism as she disappeared into the mist, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had already conquered their inner doubts. The test of elements. Halfway up the mountain, Elena encountered her first major storm. Winds howled at 80 miles per hour, threatening to tear her from the rock face. The temperature dropped to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow whipped across the mountain face like frouncing bullets, and visibility dropped to mere feet. Other climbers in the area panicked. She could hear their desperate voices crackling through her radio, some screaming for immediate rescue, others arguing with their guides about whether to continue or retreat. One group had already lost their nerve completely, abandoning thousands of dollars worth of equipment in their hasty descent. But Elena had trained for this moment. She had spent years conditioning her mind to expect the unexpected, visualizing scenarios exactly like this one. Instead of fighting the wind or cursing the weather, she found a sheltered outcropping and calmly set up her emergency bivouac. While others exhausted themselves battling forces beyond their control, Elena conserved her energy and studied the storm patterns. She pulled out her weather instruments, not in panic, but with scientific curiosity. She ate a measured portion of her rations, hydrated properly, and used the forced pause to review her route for the next section. Other climbers radioed her position, asking if she needed rescue. "Negative," she replied simply, waiting for the window. She had learned that resistance creates suffering, but adaptation creates opportunity. When the storm passed 18 hours later, she continued upward with full energy reserves while others descended in defeat, their confidence shattered and their bodies depleted. The silence of strength as Elena climbed higher. The air grew thinner and the path more treacherous. At 18,000 feet, she encountered a group of experienced climbers who had turned back. They were dejected, some nursing minor injuries, others simply broken by the mountain's relentless demands. Their leader, a man with decades of climbing experience, looked at Elena with genuine confusion. "How are you so calm?" he asked, studying her steady breathing and composed demeanor. "We've been climbing for 20 years, and this mountain has us rattled. Aren't you afraid? Don't you feel the pressure?" Elena paused, not to catch her breather. Conditioning was superior, but to consider her response. She looked at the climber with neither arrogance nor pity, just quiet understanding. "Fear is just information," she said simply. "It tells me to be careful, not to quit. Pressure is a privilege. It means I'm doing something that matters." The climber pressed further. "But what's your secret? What training did you do? What's your strategy?" Elena shouldered her pack and resumed climbing. She didn't explain her years of mental conditioning, her daily meditation practice, her philosophy of detachment from outcomes. She didn't describe the countless hours she'd spent visualizing this exact moment, or the way she trained her mind to separate emotion from execution. She didn't need to justify her approach or convince anyone of her methods. Her steady progress up the mountain spoke louder than any explanation could. Some knowledge, she had learned, could only be earned through experience, not given through words. As she disappeared into the clouds above, the group of climbers watched with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. They had witnessed something rare, someone who had mastered not just the technical skills of climbing, but the mental game that defeated most people before they even reached the hard parts. The summit of self-mastery near the peak, at 24,000 feet, where the air held barely enough oxygen to sustain life, Elena faced her greatest challenge yet, the final ascent, required crossing the notorious Devil's Ridge, a narrow spine of ice and rock, with deadly 1,000-foot drops on both sides. The wind here was fierce and unpredictable. The ice was treacherous and constantly shifting, and visibility was nearly zero due to the cloud cover. This section had earned its fearsome reputation. Over the past decade, 17 climbers had attempted this final approach. Only 3 had succeeded. 7 had turned back in terror. 7 others had fallen and never returned, their bodies claimed by the mountain's unforgiving embrace. Elena stood at the base of the ridge and surveyed the challenge before her. Other climbers had described this moment's crushing weight of knowing that everything you've worked for comes down to the next hours, and that a single mistake means death. She felt the familiar whisper of doubt creep into her mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe this is too dangerous. Maybe you should turn back while you still can. Her heart rate elevated slightly, and she could feel adrenaline beginning to flood her system. But Elena had learned something that others hadn't. She couldn't control the mountain, the weather, or the inherent danger of her situation. She could only control her response to them. She had trained for years to recognize the difference between martial caution and paralyzing fear. Instead of fighting these thoughts, she acknowledged them like old acquaintances. I see you. Fair. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'll be careful. Then she let them pass through her mind without taking root. She checked her equipment methodically, not in panic, but with the systematic precision of someone who had rehearsed these movements thousands of times. Each carabiner, each rope connection, each crampon attachment was verified twice. She adjusted her breathing to account for the thin air and began the crossing. Step by step, breath by breath, she moved across the ridge. When a gust of wind threatened her balance, she didn't panic or overcompensate. She simply shifted her weight and waited for it to pass. When her body screamed for rest, she listened to the information without letting it dictate her actions. When visibility dropped to zero and she had to navigate by feel alone, she trusted her preparation and her instincts. Halfway across the ridge, her radio crackled with a message from base camp, where the reports showed another major storm system approaching faster than expected. She had perhaps an hour before conditions would become unsurvivable. Other climbers might have rushed, letting urgency override caution. Elena simply maintained her pace. Rushing would increase the chance of a fatal mistake, and getting to the summit would mean nothing if she didn't survive to descend. She moved with the same methodical precision, neither speeding up nor slowing down, trusting that consistent progress would get her where she needed to be. The view from above. When Elena finally reached the summit, she didn't raise her arms in victory or shout her triumph to the world. The peak was smaller than she had imagined, it barely large enough for 2 people to stand, but the view was infinite. She could see for hundreds of miles in every direction, across mountain ranges that stretched to the horizon like frowning waves. She simply sat her down on the narrow summit, pulled out her water bottle, and took a quiet sip while absorbing the moment that few humans had ever experienced. The silence up here was profound. No wind, no voices, just the sound of her own controlled breathing. She stayed for exactly 15 minutes, taking photos not for social media or public recognition, but for her own memory. She planted a small flag, not with her name or any proclamation, but simply marking that someone had been here, had proven it was possible. As she prepared to descend, Elena reflected on the journey. The summit was spectacular, but it wasn't the real victory. The real victory had been every moment. She chose discipline over comfort, preparation over hope, composure over panic. The mountain had been her teacher, but the lesson had been about mastering herself. The approaching storm clouds reminded her that the summit was only halfway, still had to get down alive. But she felt no anxiety about this. The same principles that had gotten her up would get her down. Steady progress, methodical preparation, and an unshakable belief in her own capabilities. The descent and the legacy. Elena's descent was as methodical as her ascent. But now she moved with an additional awareness, was carrying the responsibility of proving that the route was not just survivable going up, but coming down as well. Other climbers' lives might depend on the path she was validating. As she carefully navigated back across Devil's Ridge, now with the storm approaching and visibility worsening, she encountered other climbers on their way up. They were part of a large expedition that had been waiting for weather windows, watching her progress through telescopes from lower camps. "You made it," one of them shouted, their voice filled with awe and excitement. "Tell us everything. What's it like up there? What's your secret? How do we prepare for what's ahead?" They peppered her with questions, all asking for advice, for secrets, for the key to her success. Some offered money for private coaching sessions. Others wanted her to endorse their gear or join their expedition companies. Elena listened patiently, but didn't give them a formula or a motivational speech. She understood that what they really wanted, a shortcut, a guarantee, a magic technique, didn't exist. The path to the summit couldn't be purchased or borrowed. It had to be built through years of dedicated preparation. Instead, she said simply, train your mind like you train your body. The mountain doesn't care about your fears or your dreams. It only responds to your preparation and your composure. But more than that, you have to know why you're here. If you're climbing for other people's approval, the mountain will expose that weakness. She helped them check their gear, pointed out hazards they should watch for, and shared practical information about route conditions. But she didn't try to convince them to continue or turn back. That decision, like every meaningful decision in life, had to come from within. As the storm intensified, Elena continued her descent with the same steady rhythm. She reached base camp just as the worst weather hit, having timed her journey with precision that came from years of experience reading natural signs, rather than depending solely on technology. Later, when reporters and documentary filmmakers found her, they expected dramatic stories of triumph over adversity, near-death experiences, and emotional breakthroughs. Instead, Elena spoke quietly about preparation, about the importance of mental training, and about how the mountain had simply confirmed what she already knew about herself. The summit was beautiful, she told them, but it wasn't why I climbed. I climbed to see if I had truly mastered the person I'd been training to become. The mountain was just the testing ground. Years later, Elena became known not for the records she broke or the media attention she received, but for the quiet confidence she carried in everything she did. She never wrote a best-selling book about her experience or launched a motivational speaking career. She simply returned to her work as a high-altitude rescue specialist, using her skills to help others who found themselves in impossible situations. But among serious climbers, her name was whispered with respect, not because she was the fastest or the strongest, but because she had demonstrated something rare in a world obsessed with external validation: the power of moving with complete self-assurance, untouched by others' opinions or expectations. The code Elena lived by was she called the Mountain Climber's Code: prepare for the storm before it arrives. Mental strength is built in the calm moments, not during the crisis. Move with the elements, not against them. Resistance creates suffering. Adaptation creates progress. Let your actions speak louder than your words. Results command more respect than promises. Climb your own mountain. Others' opinions of your journey are irrelevant to your destination. The summit is internal. External achievements are temporary. Inner mastery is permanent. The mountain doesn't ask if you're ready. It simply waits to see if you've prepared yourself to meet it on its terms. In life, as in climbing, the strongest people aren't those who never face storms. They're the ones who remain unshaken when the winds howl.